So I've seen Karin Slaughter going around the booktube community rather slowly, and I thought that I would make a definitive guide to Karin Slaughter. As of now, I've completed all of her standalones, her series, and the majority of her short stories. I basically read all the Karin Slaughter that I'm going to read that she has published. As she publishes more, I will tackle those. But I feel like Karin Slaughter is definitely a very daunting author in the sense that she has a lot of books and they have very, very hefty topics. You're kind of like unsure of where to start, and so that's what I'm going to help you with. I'm going to break down her stuff into like her standalones, her series, and her short stories. And I'm also going to talk about my thoughts and feelings on some of them and kind of break down the stories for you and the best way to read them. I want to start this off by saying that Karin Slaughter, none of her books, there's no exception to any of these like warnings. They all depict very graphic violence against women. They all take place in Georgia, so in the South. There's no shortage of racist, homophobic, and sexist like themes and like discussions and characters. So first I want to talk about her standalones. I'm going to talk about the one that I see going around the most, the first one I ever read, and that is Pretty Girls. This I ended up giving 5 stars. So I don't want to spill too much because a lot of the fun of going to this is like all the twists and turns, but it essentially follows these two estranged sisters who meet up together as they uncover a like really deep sex crime, like a not sex crime but like a sex like ring essentially. There are lots of twists and turns. It's also a kind of dual timeline because it also connects to a past crime that connects the women. It is super intriguing, super graphic and violent. I think one of the things that definitely made me give it a 5 star was that there's a point where the villain is talking, or the, you know, bad guy, and even though I know more than the main character does, I fully believe he's a good dude. I'm like, oh yeah, he's not bad. Even though I know 100% that he is. And because her writing and the way that she did it is just that good that it had me convinced, someone who knew all the answers, that it deserved a 5 star. This is definitely one of her more graphic and very, very detailed books. There's definitely lots of sexual assault, rape, lots of violence. It's very graphic, very violent. It's a book that I will never be able to reread again just because of how graphic and violent and just hard to read it is, but she just does a good job with it. Like, it's handled very carefully in my opinion. Like, I feel like the way that she's done it is horrific. Like, the book itself is horrific, but it's a very well written book. So this is one that I've seen go around. Another one that I've seen go around is The Good Doctor. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It basically follows a dual timeline of this woman named Charlotte. It shows like a past tragedy that happened and then a current tragedy, and it's just how she's dealing with both and how they both connect, and it's super interesting. The further you go, the more meat you get to the story, how stories go, but it like consistently like rewrites itself, and so overall it's like super intriguing, super interesting. Still very, very graphic and violent, very on par with her typical writing. Next is Cop Town, which I actually haven't rated. I did read it, but I did not rate it because it just left me feeling really gross. And I know that's weird because I just talked about how her other books are basically just could be considered torture porn, but this one takes place in the 70s in the South, and it's about these female cops on the force and trying to be detectives, and the entire book, the plot of the book, is based on being homophobic and being sexist and racist. Like, these are themes that are in her books a lot because it does take place in the South, but it just felt like these were the driving forces of this. Like, that's all it was about. And for me, I just don't think that there's like a need for that. Like, we're living in 2020 and we're still having to deal with this stuff in real life. Like, I don't need a book written in, written in 2014 about the 70s about how racist and homophobic and sexist people were, because guess what? They still are. It just wasn't a book that I enjoyed. It's not one that I'll ever recommend from Karin Slaughter. It's not one that I will ever rate. It's not one that I will ever own. It's just one that I didn't like I didn't like it. And I'm trying to be like unbiased in this, but there's like some things that I'm just not gonna promote. The last standalone is Pieces of Her, which I would say I gave like 3.5-ish stars. This is very, very different from her typical writing. So if you want to kind of start in slow with Karin Slaughter, I could say you could do Pieces of Her. It basically follows this woman who's at the mall with her mother, and there is a gunman, and the mother basically takes him down, and her mother like gives the daughter's instructions on where to go, and it leads her to like a car with a bunch of money in it because her mother isn't who she said she was. and the daughter like is trying to figure out like who her mother is and like what's happening, because her mother has like a regular job and her mother's not someone who could like ninja fight some gunmen. And so again, it has a dual timeline, so it's going like in the present with the daughter dealing with like who is my mom, and the past where you figure out like the story that her mother went through. It has like a more political based driving force than her other books, which are definitely more like sexual violence and just like murder type. It was still super interesting, and they're actually making a Netflix show about it, so I'm excited to see how they do that and how it turns out. A lot of the main focuses on her standalones are definitely like female family relationships and mother, daughter, sisters, violence against women. Very graphic, very explicit. She doesn't shy away from details. So again, if this isn't something that you're interested in, if this isn't something that you could stomach reading, I don't recommend her. But if you can, and you are interested, and you do like thrillers, and you do like the murder aspect of it, these are definitely ones for you. All of these are typically like non-police procedural type stories, and that's where we move into her series, which are definitely more police procedural type stories. She has 2 series, Grant County and Will Trent. They do overlap, so I do recommend reading Grant County and then the Will Trent series. You can do what you want, but this is the best way to do it. So the Grant County series, there's 6 books, and I averaged out my ratings, and it gets like a 3.8 out of 5, a 4-star series. It basically follows this woman named Sarah, who is the town coroner and pediatrician, and her ex-husband Jeffrey, who is the town police chief. Each book you can essentially read by itself, be able to understand and go through it all, because each book is like a new like murder, a new mystery type. The only issue is that there are like little kind of things that weave throughout, like Sarah and Jeffrey's relationship, Sarah's story, Jeffrey's story, his background, and then our third main character who comes in, Lena Adam, her story is woven in there as well. I would definitely say that I prefer the Grant County series. Is less brutal, and I think it's only less brutal because it's spread out so much. There's still lots of like very terrible, very descriptive, very awful things that happen in each of these books, but I feel like in comparison to some of her standalones, like in comparison to Pretty Girls, they don't feel as graphic and as bad. The first one is definitely more on par, which is Blindsided, but the rest kind of follow a more toned down version. Her next series, which is the Will Trent series, which is currently ongoing, there are 9 books, and out of those 9, I average is like a 3.7. So again, a 4-star series. This follows a GBI, Will Trent, and it's him like solving crime. He does a lot of undercover stuff. He's a very unique character in the sense that he's dyslexic, and so he can't really read above a 2nd grade level, and that's a major part of his character. It's a really interesting piece of the story and of him. The way that this 2 series cross over, and it's not like a spoiler or anything, they end up interacting in the 3rd Will Trent book. So Sarah does work for the people in Will Trent's like area, and so that's when they cross over. I actually really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to see like how far the story is gonna go. I just finished book 9, and book 10 will be coming out sometime this next coming year. Sorry for the clip change. I somehow lost the footage where I talk about the short stories for Karin Slaughter, so here I am putting that in. That's why lighting, my hair, everything except for the outfit. I've ended up putting on the same outfit for this. So I just want to talk about her short story collection. All of the novellas she has for like her like series, I love those short stories, mainly because she's working on established characters. So when she's working with established content, it comes across a lot better, but her actual just short stories are not good. She like relies heavily on like a lot of the content that she uses in her like long form writing does not come across the same. So like one of her stories is from The Unbreakable Heart, I believe is the collection. It's essentially about this woman who's at a church, and there's these people who are fixing up the church, and they're people of color, and she's just being racist, and all while she's dealing with like a secret. It's just like this doesn't come across as handled as well as like her long form content does, because there's nothing established. So I read The Unimaginable Unbreakable Heart, and I read a bunch of them. Some of them I ended up reading twice because I listened to like a bind up. And I think I ended up giving it 2 stars because there's one story that relies heavily on shock value, but I had to like listen to it twice just to make sure I understood what happened. I mean, all of them fell really flat because I find that her works don't transfer well in short format. Again, this has to do with the fact that she works very well in very elaborate long form detailed, like all of the details is where her writing shines. But if you do want to like take a second just to go through, I don't really recommend them, but if you're a fan of short stories and you really just like want something that's her writing in a short format, I would say go for it. But I'm finding that I'm not a fan of her writing in short story format. So thank you for listening to me babble on and on about Karin Slaughter. Please let me know if you've read any of her work, what you think about her work. If you hate her work, let me know. I want to know. Let's talk about it. Again, I've just seen some of her work going around with really popular creators. I know that Emma Books, she read some. Sarah Without an H, Kayla from Books and Lala, she read some Karin Slaughter. I just kind of wanted to educate the masses. So thank you for watching.